So this video, that's that different. It's like Lord of the Rings. You got swords and armor and horses.
I got pretty into Game of Thrones.
Oh, so, yeah,
I don't take my clothes off,
that's the more present reference.
I don't
than Lord
do the
of the
like,
Rings.
oops, my dress has fallen off. Game of Thrones. I do the
Khaleesi.
I do the sword fighting, but there's some funny stories behind that video.
Well, that's what we're here for. We're here for funny stories with Katie Tunstall.
Well, first, it's the Invisible Empire video, and first of all, the guy who is the sword fighting knight in the video, the guy who was meant to do it phoned up 10 minutes before he was meant to be there and told us that he'd fallen off his motorbike on the motorway and he was okay and he was going to be there in like 10 minutes. He didn't show up for 2 hours. And so when you're shooting a music video in one day, you can't really have the guy who's in the video not turning up. And so we didn't really know what to do. And it was in this beautiful forest in Kent, in England, south of London. And there's 3 guys working in this forest, 3 foresters, if you will.
There you go.
And one of them, Julian, has been doing medieval recreation sword fighting for 12 years, is the right size for the armor, and is allowed the day off. And so he basically takes the day off and becomes the knight in the video and teaches me how to do it because I didn't know, I'd never done it before.
It's a new skill.
Yeah, so he was just this complete angel sent by the god of Game of Thrones to save the day. And then secondly, I am a horse rider, but I've not done a lot. Majorly confidence over technique. And the director had just gone to the beach a few days before and just found someone with a horse and just said, hey, do you mind if we use your horse in a video? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so the horse was kind of mental. It was a lovely, lovely horse, but quite old actually, but incredibly excited to be on the beach and did not want to stand still. And so while they're like pulling focus and getting everything ready, I'm having to run this massive horse all around the beach. And there's people everywhere. You can't see them in the video. There's all these people having their picnics. And it was like driving a sports car. It's like, if you don't turn the wheel, it's just going to go straight into someone's picnic. And children. And it was pretty intense. And so I was kind of the whole time going, stop, stop. And then now and then, and then when the camera came on, I'd just be like, poise, stop.
Consummate professional.
Yeah, I had a very sore bum for about a week.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was full on.
So Invisible Empire opens the record.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful opening, and even the little, I don't know what it is at the intro of that song.
It's actually a mellotron.
Okay.
Which is a beautiful, very old instrument, and one of the few real ones is at Wavelab Studio in Tucson, because it's very common to use it as a plug-in, like just an electronic thing, copying it. But you feed, it's rolls of card with holes in, and it reads like an old organ, or maybe it's discs. It might be metal discs actually, and but it's kind of samples of flutes and samples of clarinets, and it just sounds fantastic. It was used in a lot of old kids animation in the 70s, so in Britain, so it's very nostalgic sound for me. It almost bridges it. What do you call it? Nature techno from the last record, I think is what you told me.
So it almost kind of bridges that into what this is.
Folktronica.
Folktronica, I like that.
Yeah.
Next record, Folktronica. Did the songs just lend themselves to that kind of arrangement, or was it purposefully going into saying, I don't want to add all the stuff over it?
It was a very easy record. This is definitely the easiest album I've ever made, and it just came so quickly. The first half of the record I met Hau Gelb, front guy of Giant Sand, maverick punk spirit, genius musician, in February of last year, and he said, come out to Tucson and do some recording. We didn't say let's make an album. He just said come out and record and let's have some fun, and I really needed that kind of experimental approach where it wasn't labeled before we did anything. And in the February and March before going to Tucson, I wrote like 9 songs, which was a lot for me. And that was the 6 of those were the first half of the record.
And I heard you wrote basically everything at the same time, kind of scribbling back and forth. So did lyrics lend themselves from one song and say, no, that fits better here, and chord changes, that kind of thing?
I wrote them all in tandem, which I don't usually do. I'll always usually stick to one song and finish it. But these all were, it was like that crazy old school game at the fair where the horses are going and you're cranking and they're kind of all coming in. And so I kept getting quite stressed out that I wasn't finishing anything. And And then they all finished at the same time, and somehow they stayed completely separate entities from one another. There's definitely similarities, I think, stylistically between the songs, but in terms of their content, they stayed pretty hermetically sealed.
Did
in themselves.
I heard it was really hot when you were making this record, like
It was
sweltering
just
heat.
getting hotter.
Does
and
that
hotter.
loopiness add to the creativity?
Well, I just couldn't go outside. It's just too dangerous for a Scottish person in Arizona. It's really a threatening temperature. But it was totally bearable when I was there in April, and we took a drive now and then in the evening, which was really cool. And then when I went back in November, it was cooler, and my very good friend Jane Mingay, who's a great photojournalist, who decided to do all the photos for my record, her and I just took Howe's 1960s Barracuda and drove into the desert and had a great time just getting all the imagery. And so it really sinks in, that landscape's.
It's the first.
pretty
Just talking about
amazing.
the imagery. It's the first time it's not your face. Like it's still you on
Yeah.
the cover, but it's the opposite side. It's the back.
Yeah, I think it's probably significant.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. It came very easily, actually, because it was just so striking with the landscape. It just spoke about what the record was like, and it was the first time as well in my career where I really knew what I wanted to wear. I'd never engaged very much with image, and I just sort of threw on a rock uniform and get some leather trousers and a cool T-shirt or whatever. But I'd never had a vision for how I wanted to look when I made an album or played. And I think a lot of that was actually deliberately shying away from it because, A, I'm not madly interested in fashion. I like nice clothes. I like well-designed stuff, but I'm not crazy about getting involved with it. But really, I think the main thing was that as a female artist, I was just really paranoid about having that double judgment of being a female musician, that it's so much emphasis is put on how you look. And I just really didn't want to engage with that. I just wanted to be a musician. I didn't want the attention to be on. I didn't want to be in magazines. I didn't want to have people comment on what I was wearing. So I just got on with it, really, and wore what I liked. But this album's been very different because I had this really strong image of wearing a suit and wearing this hat that I'd found in Italy and kind of assuming more of a character, really.
Did you have that going into songwriting, or did
Yeah,
the songwriting speak to that imagery?
The wearing a suit thing had already happened. I kind of had this feeling that I just wanted to dress classy and more formal. But formal is really the wrong word, because I look at someone like Nick Cave wearing a suit, and that's what I mean. It's actually just a very classic, powerful image.
Do you do that on stage too?
Yeah.
That's the character for this whole?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
so
it
that's
is
a different
me.
way of
Yeah,
doing a run.
It is me. It's not an alter ego in any way, but it's definitely part of me.
So speaking of being on tour and talking about the music as opposed to the fashion part of everything,
Yeah.
just you.
Just me
Just
on my
you.
own solo tour.
And we're starting the tour today.
Yeah,
You excited?
first gig. I'm always excited about the first gig. It's always slightly nerve-wracking because I don't think about it until about half an hour before.
Okay.
And I think, okay,
So is the set list kind of
I've learned
whatever
all
you
the
feel
new
like?
stuff, but I've forgotten all the old stuff. My brain tends to delete when it doesn't need stuff, which is annoying sometimes.
How will the old stuff play in? I mean, they must have
Yeah.
been written on acoustic guitars, right? So
Yeah,
they would work.
exactly. I mean, I think bar my last record, which was very electronica inspired and made in Berlin and really kind of an adventure in sonics rather than songwriting. There's still a few songs on that I can easily sit and play, but maybe less so with that record. But in general, all the stuff I write, you can sit and play.
Cool.
So it's quite nice to deliver them very stripped back.
When you saw my tweet yesterday, people did respond, asking
Oh,
some
really?
questions. Yeah,
Good.
it doesn't happen every time, but we got a couple.
Someone asked one, and I replied to her, and I said,
Did you
I
really?
know the
I hope-
answer to
well,
that
I
one.
hope it's not one of them that I
Well,
choose.
we'll see. I didn't tell her the answer.
Okay.
If you don't ask it, then I'll answer it.
Okay, cool. It's post-apocalyptic UK.
Okay.
And is this the one?
No.
No. Okay. And you have to burn all your books and guitars to keep warm, except one of each. Book and a guitar. What would they
Book
be?
and a guitar. Well, guitar, I would keep my 1959 Gibson acoustic. It would have been my 1975 Gretsch Falcon, but I'd need an amp and a plug.
Right.
The apocalypse is going to ruin all the plug
No
sockets.
power.
So I'm going to take my new, very old 1959 Gibson acoustic parlor guitar, which is so beautiful to play.
Parlor, the little guy.
Yeah, it's half size and suits this record down to a T, but it's like the guitar I've been looking for forever.
Is it the guitar that's all over this record? Is it,
No,
you use a bunch of different stuff?
I found it a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And I saw it and it was a proper, there you are, I've been looking for you. So it's been really nice to find him.
And one book.
One book.
Yeah.
It's really hard. What would I want to read over and over again? That's the thing that I always find difficult with this question. It's just like, what would you get more and more and more out of? You have to take something quite big.
You have a lot of time on your hands.
Yeah, exactly. I might actually take Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking and try and
understand it.
Get to grips with it.
Okay. That kind of goes to your tweet the other day,
like
with the white blood cells in the sun.
Yeah.
Blew my mind.
Well, I'll just explain that basically
there
was, he was like, what is he talking about? You know, the white blood cells in the sun.
Don't worry about it.
If the sun was the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way would be the size of the United States of America. It's crazy.
Okay, other Twitter question, very similar, same girl, but I like these ones. If you got it's very apocalyptic, this one. If you got washed up on an island with an old record player and one vinyl.
That's the one.
That's
I think
the one.
she said a Dan set and one.
A Dan set
record player. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Django Reinhardt. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily my favorite record, but it sounds amazing on an old Dan set. And I had one.
Oh, that's why she mentioned these specific record players.
An old Dan set record player. It's one of the ones with the speakers inbuilt. The old box ones from the 50s, and you put the lid up, and then when you close it, it creates the sound properly. And but new records sound foul on those things. You just don't get any width and depth of sonics. But Django Reinhardt on one of those is like time. It's like a time machine. Just feel like you're in a good place at a good time.
We don't have much time, but just the idea that the vinyl idea, and I know you kind of crafted this record with the idea of two. Did you ever think about releasing it separately as two EPs or whatever you want to call it? It always had to be one.
It was always going to be one record, and it was very much inspired by the A and B side of a vinyl. So it was lovely. When
so it had to be.
Held the vinyl in my hands. It was great to know that it had reached its true perfection.
So we do something called 5 questions. 5 quick questions, 1 word answers.
Okay.
And this will be
one word.
1 word. 10 years today, we've been doing the same 5 questions.
Okay.
Road or studio?
Studio. Used to be road. Now studio.
Lennon or McCartney?
Lennon.
When you hear a song, what hits you first? Lyrics, melody, or rhythm?
Melody.
If someone's never heard Katie Tunstall before, what song do they start with?
I don't know the answer to that one. Personally, what would I choose? That's a really hard question.
I know, it's my new favorite one.
I would say you'd probably have to listen to Black Horse and the Cherry Tree, because it's just my little package.
I like that. A live version or the recorded version?
A live version.
Jules Holland?
With Seven Nation Army in the middle of it. You can find it on YouTube.
In 1 word, Katie Tunstall.
Me.
That was a quick answer. I like that. That's good.